All right. Hello. And thank you for being here, and thank you for your patience as we worked out our small technical difficulty. So I am Pamela Morgan, who, along with Rosa Lazard, serve as co-chair for NGO CSW New York. And it's my great pleasure and privilege to welcome you to this workshop, Mobilizing for Equality, Leveraging Gender Parity to Address Structural Inequities. And before we get started, let's just stand and stretch, because a lot of you have been sitting, so if you could just stand and stretch so that we can That's right. I think that we need that. It's 3:30, and it's been a long day. So it's really inspiring to see. They don't want to stop stretching, and it's okay. I understand. But it's really, truly inspiring to see that so many of our partners from across civil society and the UN have gathered here at this convention center for this important convening, and here today at 3:30 after a very long day. So thank you. We meet at a time of overlapping crisis, climate shocks, economic inequality, and rising authoritarianism. But in the face of these challenges, one truth remains: gender parity and feminist leadership are not optional, they're essential if we are to build inclusive, resilient societies that leave no one behind. Our discussion today connects directly to Commitment 5 of the Copenhagen Declaration, achieving equality and equity between women and men, and draws strength from frameworks like the UN Gender Parity Strategy and CEDAW. These remind us that policy, resources, and diplomacy all matter when it comes to turning ideals into impact. During today's roundtable session, we will explore 3 mutually reinforcing pathways: access to justice, investing in gender equality, and feminist foreign policy as strategies for dismantling structural inequities and enabling transformative leadership. Our collective goal today is to generate practical recommendations that can strengthen implementation of the Copenhagen Commitments and accelerate progress towards the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So, as we begin, I invite us all to think boldly, share openly, and imagine what it truly means to build systems where women's leadership is not the exception, but the norm. Because when we mobilize for equality, we don't just change institutions, we really do transform the world. So sharing moderation duties with me today are my co-chair, Rosa Lazard, and NGO CSW New York Executive Committee members, Fotini Papiajati and Ivy Cook. And we are going to, field questions in rounds of 3, 1 in each of our focal areas. But before we dig into our questions at our roundtable, we are pleased to introduce our opening speakers. Mohammed Nassiri, Chief of Staff at UN Women, has served as UN Women's Regional Director for the Arab States region since 2015. He looks so young. He previously served as a UN Women's Deputy Regional Director for the Arab States. He is very experienced in the region and related gender as well as development issues. Let's give him a hand. And Cynthia Samuel Lajuan, Special Representative to the UN and Director of the ILO, International Labor Organization Office for the United Nations since the 15th of July, 2013. Prior to her appointment to lead the ILO office in New York, She worked as the Assistant Director General and Regional Director for Africa, based at the ILO in Cote d'Ivoire. So at this time, I'm going to ask first Mohammed to give his remarks, and then for Cynthia to follow him immediately.
Thank you so much. Allow me to share it here because I cannot address you seated in respect to all of you. And I do believe that this is the highlight of the 2 days, to be with feminists, change makers, and friends who are trying to push the agenda forward with so much intentionality. And I believe what happened yesterday in New York is somehow a result of what's happening around us. So, but I'm not talking about politics. I'm the UN. I should not be talking about politics. So, but I'm very grateful to our partners, NGO, CSW, to Ivy, and to Pamela for inviting me to be here today. Really, this is the highlight of my presence here. As you rightly introduced me, I'm the Chief of Staff, but sometimes I'm the Chief of Stuff. So my job is to run around behind my boss. And this is a great, not only respite, but a reminder of why we are all here. And I'm honored to be with you. The heart of social transformation really beats strongest at the grassroots in the lives and struggles of women, of girls, and communities who refuse to accept injustice as inevitable. I am reminded of that today, now, that we are here to unite not merely in the halls of power, but spaces full of feminist power that brought the Copenhagen and Cairo alive 30 years ago. From rural villages to urban centers, from local collectives to the quiet strength of caregivers, the fight for justice, inclusion, and dignity is being waged by people who may never see a headline, but those work is the foundation of all progress. Fellow feminists, we know that justice, finance, and diplomacy are the tools by which we shape fairer systems. But they must be wielded by communities themselves. Justice is not simply a policy. It is the assurance that everyone has the right to thrive, free from violence and discrimination. Finance is not just numbers on a page. It is the means by which we invest in human potential, create jobs, and support families. Consider this. In 48 developing countries, a $360 billion annual funding gap is holding back dreams. Extending to all developing nations, or what I like to call the global majority, the shortfall is $420 billion. Diplomacy, too, must be reimagined, not as distant negotiations, but as partnership and solidarity that stretch across borders and empower every local movement. As an example, a feminist foreign policy is not just high-level strategy, it is how we collectively resist the rollback of rights. In moments when trust in institutions falters, the feminist movements remind us that human rights, inclusion, and equality are not just principles, they are the pulse of peace, development, and security. As UN Women, we continue to be committed to you, and we continue to be, hopefully, a reliable partner and also a meaningful one, to shape fairer systems through partnerships with grassroots leaders so that we might and we may be building societies that are truly resilient, inclusive, and just. In March next year, as Ivy and Pamela know so well, we will have an opportunity to advance some of our shared goals in the 70th Commission on the Status of Women, and we have just extended the invite to the new mayor of New York to open with us the CSW next year. Critically, it will examine access to justice as its priority theme. It is my hope that the Commission advances bold agreed conclusions building on Copenhagen and Beijing and the commitments made here in the political declaration adopted yesterday in dismantling barriers and advancing a more inclusive and fairer world for all. We are honored and humbled to continue to work alongside with you to build networks that stretch from community halls to international assemblies, ensuring that every recommendation we make grows from lived experiences and lead to real impact. I'm looking forward to hearing the examples from the evidence-based strategies and the conversations that are going to take place over the coming hour. And thank you, and I apologize if I rambled after lunch.
Good afternoon, colleagues, friends, sisters. I see a couple of brothers. It's really wonderful to be here. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Loud and
Excellent. Let me just start by congratulating us on what happened yesterday, not in New York, but here in Doha. The Doha Political Declaration was adopted.
Yes.
It's major. And we got here because we worked together. It wasn't easy. We didn't get everything we wanted, but we got a good declaration.
True.
I think we should celebrate.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying anything about New York. I'm a civil servant. Thank you so very much for inviting the International Labour Organization to be part of this very important conversation. And I really want to thank the NGO CSW, particularly Pamela Morgan and the entire crew for the strengthened collaboration with the International Labour Organization. And I thank you, Pamela, for what you said in setting the stage in terms of the times in which we're living in. And it's very easy to be despondent. But the World Social Justice Report that was launched about 6 weeks ago, and we had Pamela there and other colleagues, shows us that it's not all gloom. Compared to 30 years ago, the world is healthier, the world is wealthier, the world is more educated. Working poverty has reduced significantly. Levels of unemployment have reduced significantly. And the SG made reference to that, the DSG made reference to that this morning. However, there are still some fundamentals, and I'll just highlight some. The top 1% of the world control about 40% of the wealth in the world, and 20% of the income in the world. A woman, on average, still earns 20% less than the income of a man for the same work. There are a lot of others, but I'll just stop there. So the challenges are significant. We have the declaration, the Doha Political Declaration. We have to implement it. In part of the things that will address the issues raised in our conversation are well reflected in the document. And it's important that the same energy that went into ensuring that we have a very good document goes into the implementation. One of the fundamental things that we see in that document is that decent work and full and productive employment, along with poverty eradication and social inclusion, are seen as the three pillars that underpin inclusive social development. So we have the tools, in addition to all the other documents. But we have to make sure that these tools, this document is translated into the lived reality of every woman in every part of the world. I'll leave us with three quick issues. First, access to justice, especially justice in the world of work, is foundational, not just for gender equality, but for sustainable development. It is central for realizing both human and labor rights and ensuring that not only that nobody is left behind, but that they are not forgotten. It's also crucial for ensuring the lack of discrimination, whether it's on the basis of race or sex or other differences. The ILO Convention 100 and Convention 111, both on equal pay and non-discrimination, are very, very pertinent. Ensuring women's access to justice is a prerequisite not only for gender equality, but for social cohesion and for inclusive development. It's not only a legal obligation, it's a strategic investment for social development and peace, anchored on social justice. Indeed, it is known that when all workers are compensated fairly, wealth is distributed more equally, and those structural inequalities that perpetuate poverty are reduced and, in fact, eliminated. Second, public finance and budgets are key to achieving the kind of gender equality outcomes and inclusive development outcomes that we seek. Public budgets are not neutral. Fiscal policy and taxation have the capacity to either widen gender gaps or reduce them. By adopting and scaling gender-responsive budgeting approaches, countries can introduce principles of equality and equity in public finance management, enhancing the quality and impact of public spending for not only gender equality, but inclusive development. Without adequate financial resources and sufficient budget allocations, gender equality policies and reforms cannot be effectively implemented. This is particularly relevant in the context of decent work and care work, where investing in care is an enabler of equality and non-discrimination, as well as an engine for decent work and national wealth. Statistics have shown the amount that is generated and enhanced in GDP when we invest in care. The ILO emphasizes that care is not a cost. It is an investment, and it's a foundational pillar for prosperity and equitable and resilient societies. Expanding social protection systems, making social protection universal, including maternity protection, child and family benefits, health protection, among others, is critical for not only enhancing gender equality and gender parity, but also economic security. Third, and my last point, the global financial architecture must serve equality. It must serve equality. And this is not just doing good because it looks good. It's actually good for the economy, and it's good for global economic, social, and all-round development. Many low and medium income countries faced debt service payments that surpass the spendings on education, on health, and on other social goods. Embedding labor rights and gender equality into global trade, into supply chains, into investment frameworks, help shift international relations and investment towards solidarity and inclusion. And I'll end with what I started with. The World Social Summit, titled the Second World Summit for Social Development, provides us with a unique opportunity to reaffirm our shared commitment to social justice, decent work, equality, and the financing that closes the persistent gender gaps and enhance inclusive and all-round development. We must seize this moment. I thank you.
Thank you both for your inspiring words and for really setting the stage for our roundtable discussion. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you.
You want us back down?
Yes,
Then we can move back.
I think it'll be more comfortable. Yeah. So we're going to start with the first question, and we have people who will pass the microphone. And the first question is going to be under our first topic of women's access to justice. But I haven't asked the question yet. So just a minute. Okay. What mechanisms of accountability, judicial review, independent oversight, or civil society monitoring best ensure that investments and diplomatic commitments to gender equality are not symbolic, but enforceable and measurable through justice systems? And I'll give you 30 seconds to read it. Okay, please.
Thank you so much, Paula. My name is Rasha. I'm from Yemen, also Canadian. I'm a director of Peace Track Initiative, which is working on feminist peace building. I think one of the things working on track 2 and diplomacy efforts to bring peace into Yemen and other countries in the region, I've always been shocked when we talked about WPS agenda, that it is not binding. I heard this from diplomats, from UN envoys. So circling back to the CEDAW, and now we have a moment where we are reviewing the recommendation 30, and I think we need to strengthen it to reflect the WPS agenda and make it stronger so that it becomes somehow a legally binding document. I felt the WPS agenda was kind of a diversion from the real essence of the CEDAW commitment. So just merging it and bringing them together as one tool that is legally binding, and then empowering the CEDAW committee to follow up and the civil society to hold the governments accountable is one space I think we need to keep focusing. I know we have been for so many years working on this, but I think it's still the only tool that we can really bring accountability. Thank you.
Your remarks are particularly relevant. Your remarks are particularly relevant for NGO CSW because our Committee on Women, Peace and Security works so diligently to try to support just the issues that you're talking about. And Ivy, sitting next to you, is the co-chair, so speak to her about joining the committee. Yeah. Okay. Are there any other comments? Yes.
Thank you. First, I think the subject of this session was great. I think we should not assess it by the thin presence. I think it's the afternoon thing. But the leveraging gender parity for structural inequalities, I think, could work both ways, from social inequalities to gender parity. But my question is specifically to Mohammad's presentation. And it's about feminist foreign policy. Because I think this is also at the root of several issues. You know, one of the kind of remarks that the previous presenter made about the peace. So things like SCR 1325 or CEDAW or General Recommendations 30, for example. I mean, these things, they are there, but they have not been advanced to the extent that they should have been. So are there good examples of feminist foreign policy that, that could be sort of presented to the world? That's the question.
Thank you so much for that comment. And rather than respond to it now, we're going to wait until we get to that segment. But what we're going to do now is focus on the first question that has to do with women's access to justice. We're not going to forget about your comment, but we're going to wait until we're talking about feminist foreign policy. So are there any other comments about women's access to justice? What do you think civil society can do? What are the things that we as civil society can do to ensure that the commitments, the promises are being kept?
Hi, my name is Amira. I'm from Tunisia. And I think the thing from multiple actions that the civil society can do is advocating about gender equality and about talking about the women in our countries. For example, in my country, Tunisia, which is a North African country, and it's very progressive in women rights especially, since 2021, we got another president, so another regime that he don't believe about parity or women in political or social positions. So I think it's our role as a civil society, first of all, to protect ourselves, because we need to be protected from such regimes, and second, to advocate and never stop talking about it and follow up with all the systems in the UN, such the UN Women, with all our partners also in NGOs.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Martina. I'm from Cameroon. I lead an initiative of empowering girls and women imparting values for development, and I'm a practicing lawyer. I think one of the ways we can bring or have the enforcement of these declarations or bring governments to accountability or the international organizations is by persistently reaching out to the women or to female organizations in the grassroots, having their voices represented in national programs. Because it's one thing to talk about all what is discussed here. We have intellectuals who have come from different backgrounds, but how many of these intellectuals have the mind of the woman who is working her farm and doesn't have access to the internet? How many times do we have those programs which go back to the very grassroots? Yes, there are so many organizations doing work, but can we find a way to bring or reintegrate this grassroots population, because they have majority of the problems we are talking about? If it goes to maybe rape, it is the cases down there are not well reported, not well represented, because they don't have the possibility to use the mobile applications. So we should find a way to have women at the grassroots, leaders in, where I come from, there is something we call Njangi groups. I don't know how it works in other countries, where women-led organizations, meetings, traditional meeting groups, have them represented in forums like this through national coordinators. Going back to, for instance, UN Women, if you have a program like this, we could go down to the grassroots, go to civil society organizations, ask them to fish out women who have a practical voice and influence in their communities, get them on board, pay for their flights, come to programs like this, and then they can actually represent the voices of the people and communities they are leading. And we go back with, I think with that we can really achieve something better. Thank you very much.
I could not agree more. Hi, I'm Evelyn Kilmian, and my comment here is going to tie into the second question as well. In order for us to have accountability, we have to go back to culturally relevant education. And that is going to allow for representation. It's going to allow for language and communication inclusion. And representation is what my sister here was talking about. I mean, we've been in this room for the past 2 days. How many of these women have we met? Okay, there's a lot of barriers to that, right? The flight is included, but we all sign up on this by what? By email. If the woman is in the last mile, she's struggling to make $1 a day, right? She doesn't even know her rights. She's not, so it's a whole thing, right? So we have to go back to the grassroots and create education that is culturally relevant. Meaning, not just reproduce what's in the book, but make both boys and girls know what it means to be a boy, what it means to be a girl, what does it mean to be an ally to a girl who's having her period, what does it mean when a girl says no, what's her rights to her body. Then, and only then, would she know that when something is wrong in the system, she can advocate or represent or talk to somebody about it. So for me, it just really goes down to that. How are we telling the story in terms of educating, and how are we making it reach the people? Are we putting it on TV? Are we keeping it at declarations and signing it and all applauding? What about the woman who doesn't speak French, English, and Arabic? How does she get the information? What if she doesn't have a cell phone to download the app? So how are we doing that communication, language inclusion, and education where it's needed the most?
And so it really does point to political will to do what has to be done to reach people at all levels. This microphone isn't working.
Hello? Hello?
Well, that's a perfect segue into question number 2.
Let me try let me try this microphone. I think this one works better, doesn't it? Okay. It is a perfect segue into the second topic of questions, investing in gender equality. In what ways can public and private investment in care infrastructure, education, and women-led enterprises serve as structural correctives to systemic inequities and inequalities while reinforcing peace-building and democratic governance agenda? So we have a couple of roving mics, and we invite you to give input on this question. Anyone? And just to say that we're taking notes on this to be able to provide feedback into the closing tomorrow. So we're back here.
Thank you. I thank you for talking about the first ask, which is investment. For all these sectors, right? Infrastructure, education. Again, I work in education and work with women, children and women. In the subject of investment, we really have to be innovative on the investment models. Investment is done in silo in every enterprise. If you're a nonprofit, you gotta get grant. There's no buy model going on there. So when one source of revenue is what people are counting on, then there's already an unbalance in the equation. So when we allowed all sectors to come together and fund in different places, then all stakeholders can come to the table and be able to then talk about collectively changing the systemic inequality. So again, going back to education, if all of my funding comes from one foundation, I am at risk of, one, not being sustainable, and two, having that foundation literally dictate what's the content of my curriculum. That's just as simple as that. And if it comes from one government, it's the same thing. That government can dictate. So creating innovative ways where funding cannot be in silo, but sort of collective funding models, it's one way. Another way is also, I'm not really sure how I'm gonna put this, but how do people get access to funding with the UN? It's the most convoluted, don't laugh too hard, you're gonna tell on us. It's the most convoluted systems, right? And we're sitting in all these rooms and they're saying, yeah, we're gonna, it's Copenhagen happened, this is happening again, we're gonna put in all the money, and it's like, wait a minute, you put in all the money at first. Did the people get it? Something is broken in your system. If you don't reinvent the system, I have run a nonprofit for 7 years. People come to me, they're like, oh, you go to all these UN conferences. I'm like, dude, it's self-funded, and I really can't tell you. I can't write a book about it. That's a problem right there. If we can get the funding in the hands of those who are doing the work, and we're sitting and counting on governments when people are working in places where trust is broken with these governments, then how are we going to change the system? How are we going to make it equitable?
I think that's a good question to have Mohammed reply to about the funding. But Pamela and I were just speaking about that women are self-funded for so many international meetings. You should write a book about it, because we all should it should come out, and we should all know how many and get a count. So any other input on this question, or any input about innovative financing of different forms of financing? How about investment in care infrastructure? We heard Cynthia said it's not a cost. It is an investment, a necessary one. And also the issue of education, which was brought up. Anyone else? Do we need to do a stretch to make sure that people are not sort of falling asleep New York time or any other time? Yes, thank you. In the back?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Stephanie. I have a charity for children with special needs, and we are in charge of most of them are single women, because research shows that when you have a child with special needs, most of the time that's always run away and left you with a child. And unfortunately, this can be very, very challenging. So what we are thinking of doing, because we have not started doing it yet, due to the fact that we lack funding, unfortunately, we were planning to, we bought a land already, so we want to put this, and our moms have been trained to become a farmer. So we are trying to see how we can put that land, and we can make it to become valuable, so that they can produce food that we can help them to transform, and they can sell it, so that this could help them to become financially independent. Because it's not easy for us to get the grant all the time to support them. By them doing that, that will help them to be able to not only support their children, but also meet their needs. That is why Education, it is important and the training, to be able to provide these moms with training and education in any way that they want to develop their skills. And that is the only way that we think at the moment we help them to be, kind of have their own freedom, if I can call it that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I invite Fotini now to transfer to the third question.
Thank you, Rosa. I think you see it, maybe you don't. Actually, I'll read it out. Are feminist foreign policy approaches pioneered by countries such as Sweden, Mexico, and Canada still relevant? And if so, how can they be adapted across diverse governance systems to embed gender justice and parity into peace building, trade, and climate diplomacy? As you think about the question, I can potentially share that recently the 4th Ministerial Conference on Feminist Foreign Policies just concluded a couple of weeks ago in Paris, France, with the adoption of a political declaration. We have some existing and newer commitments reaffirmed. So in your context, is this an approach that has applied, that you have been familiar with? Going back to the question earlier around promising examples, things that have worked well, distinguishing between existing obligations like parity and non-discrimination in the context of CEDAW, and nice to have commitments through feminist foreign policy. I welcome your ideas and thoughts on the topic. Please. Do we have a mic?
Good evening, everybody. Do you hear me?
Yes,
Okay,
if you can speak up just a little bit,
okay,
because the microphones
I'm
are
Mariana Yevsukova, and I represent World Federation of the Ukrainian Women's Organizations. It's a diaspora organization which is 77 years old in 30 countries. And from my experience, there is no one approach that fits all. So maybe in some countries, the Swedish model can work, and if especially we speak about Europe, but it would never work in the Middle East. And as a person who used to live in Ukraine, in Thailand, and now reside in United Arab Emirates, I can tell that this is impossible to come with this one approach. And I think that we need to change this concept when we try to bring something from the West to the East. And I heard yesterday during one of the panels, I think it was the president of Kenya, saying that probably we need to introduce more programs from south to south, you know. And but the main essence of this is that we need to take into consideration the culture, the tradition. And I also can tell that knowing what United Arab Emirates is doing, I think there is a lot to learn from United Arab Emirates to the countries in the West. But unfortunately, there is this misconception that only the West knows well how to do gender equality. I think there should be more respect to the new countries, to the young countries, to these experiences, and maybe then we will find, you know, the best models that work and can be replicated in different countries across the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mohammed, over to you to respond to the rich
Thank you.
comments.
There were few reflections and questions, and allow me to stand again to attempt and answer. Yeah. So I had a question on an example of feminist foreign policy that works and that has solid impact. And I'm not going to talk about the global north. I'm going to talk about a country from the global majority, Liberia. And they managed to validate their feminist foreign policy strategy earlier this year. And it is cutting across all their diplomatic outreach efforts. So climate negotiations, gender responsive approaches and plans, mediation efforts, when they look into putting peace forces with the UN. They have put gender equality assessment and gender responsive foreign policy roadmap. And the roadmap does set outcomes and actions, including advocacy with the executive and legislatures, establishment of a gender and social inclusion unit, and development of a national gender responsive foreign policy that will be launched in 2026. Spain, who's also another government that is adopting a feminist foreign policy, they met last week with a coalition that they called the Group of 13, and it's a group of 24 countries to push to say no more women, peace and security action plans. We just need to focus on those 115 to implement them. So how can we work with the governments that have adopted women, peace and security action plans to make sure that they are adopted and they are implemented, and how can we as Spain support them in doing that? So there is a bit of traction there. So far, I would go to what Amira was saying about the advocacy. So far, many of these feminist foreign policy approaches were about advocacy, but not really implementation. I think it's important, as you rightly alluded in the question, how can we be more concrete in the implementation? There were a few questions about how we cascade to the grassroots level, and we need to do better. Are we doing our job enough? Absolutely not. Something as simple as trying to get interns to intern with the UN. Who are the ones who get access to internships? It's those who have language, those who have access to social media platforms, and we need to work on having better outreach strategies to go to more remote universities, to people who do not necessarily speak the 7 official languages of the UN, to have them come on board. So are there attempts? Yes. Are they enough? No. The convoluted way of getting funding from the UN, absolutely. I fully agree. And this is also imposed on us by the donors, because the donor comes and says, well, you cannot give money to an NGO that doesn't have an internal control framework, who does not have certain certification in budgets and finance, etc., etc. So those are also negotiations and conversations that we need to take up with the donors as well, and with the taxpayers, because those who are having impact on the ground are not necessarily only those who have good financial systems, etc. The other part of it is that most of the work that we are doing with and for feminist civil society organizations is that we work with them as implementing partners. But are we spending enough time and effort and resources to build their capacities financially, budget-wise, administratively? No. So we also need to do that. And there's a lot of this that we need to do more. Unfortunately, until now, there is less than 1% of the ODA that goes to women organizations. So that is also a collective responsibility on all of us to continue to advocate, not only with governments and lawmakers, but also with the taxpayers. And this is what we've been trying to do as UN Women. When we go to a country, we don't talk only with the government ministries. We go to the parliament, and we speak with the parliament, the people representatives, to tell them this is what we need to do. The reality, as was maybe, I don't know if some of you have heard the OECD yesterday saying, ODA will continue to be on the decline. They are expecting that it will be up to 30% cuts across, and of course those who are paying the price are at least in our communities, are the women and girls who are not receiving these funds. So I stop here and back to you, Pamela. Allow me that I will have to leave now for another event at 4:30, but it was such an honor to be here with you. Thank you.
And with those words, I think that our 60-minute program is over. I want to give a hand to all of you. Thank you. Thank you to Mohammed. Thank you to Cynthia. And we hope to see you again. Please, here's an advertisement. The applications for parallel events for CSW 70 open on Monday, November 10th, for member organizations. If you are a member of NGO CSW New York, you will get an email with a link so that you can register your parallel event on Monday. For organizations and people who are not members, watch our website on Wednesday, because a link will be on the website on Wednesday for individuals who are not members. And with that, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you, and we will see you soon. Goodbye. Thank you.
Can I just plug one event tomorrow morning? Gender responsive social protection and economic transformation in a time of reform, in this room at 10:15 tomorrow morning. Great session.